All right, everybody, it's been a minute, but welcome back to another episode of the Boxscore Geek Show. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez, found most places as Nerd Numbers, and with me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, co-host, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Brian, we're both not watching the playoffs because our teams got bounced.
Yeah, that's right. It's not bad for the Nuggets and Warriors who lost in the round of 8. That's probably about par for, their body of work. And the Nuggets, of course, put up a tremendous 7-game series against Oklahoma City. And we're now past the round of 4, into the round of 2, the finals. And game 3 is going to be later tonight. And it's 1-1 right now, Dre. It's a
And
series.
you said you were fine. I think we'll be done well within, the first half. We're not going to get the
Oh,
series
it's
spoiled.
fine. Yeah, I'll watch on DVR. It's all good. It doesn't matter.
So you don't have to catch the commercials or bad commentary. You can watch. My parents do that with football where they wait a long enough period of time and then start watching it on DVR. And then they're basically guaranteed to kind of catch up live near the end to see who's going to win, but then don't have to wade through commercials
I
during
love
the
doing that
first.
too. Here's the other technique, Dre. If there's 2 games on DVR at once, you just flip back and forth between them and pause.
Ooh.
That's
And then if
another
you
fun one.
what happens when they're both commercial? You just pick the better commercial?
Yeah, I don't know. That's
Hmm.
tough. That's too advanced for my technique.
Yeah, well, life, etc., got in the way a little, and then of course, even some of the not wanting to interrupt playoff basketball. So I figure we can kind of to just give an overview of the show. I figure we'll kind of talk the state of the playoffs up to now, which does include the Denver Nuggets having me hold my breath. Kind of honestly, that held up the show a little, not in a bad way, where it's like if they do this, if they do this, if they do this, and then of course when they didn't, not really a lot of motivation. Be like, well, we really need to record a show now. So it was definitely motivation to be like, let's not record and see if they win. And then when they didn't win, it's like, yeah, we can push it off another week, and then that turned into a couple. And so we'll discuss what happened the last couple of rounds. We're going to talk coach firings, a topic I wanted to revisit because of the Nuggets, and we get to revisit even more. Then we're going to kind of talk the NBA Finals, including, am I going to have to go to Indiana, Brian? I might. And then, by the way, Brian, spicy news. NBA, it's almost done. NBA is old news. We're talking WNBA now because guess what? I am leading my WNBA Fantasy League. I am working on WNBA wins produced numbers. So you know what? NBA is winding down. WNBA is winding up. I have a winning team. Not anybody nearby explicitly. I'm not too far from Indiana, but of course, Caitlin Clark got injured. But my fantasy team is winning, which is enough to keep me invested. So, Brian, we might have more WNBA content in the future, which I know Dave Barry will be excited about. All right. Let's hop into the playoff recap. As mentioned, we kind of missed the semifinals in part because we were sitting there watching to see if Denver could pull off this historic upset. And let's be clear, that would have been the most historic upset of all time. And what's funny, Brian, I tried to find a golden ticket or a silver lining, not a golden ticket. That's whatever. Golden ticket would have been us advancing to the finals. Silver lining is what I was looking for. So here's the thing, Brian. The Denver Nuggets beat the Thunder 3 times in the playoffs. They also were 500 against them in the regular season, 2-2. So the Denver Nuggets had 5 wins against the Thunder, which means even if Indiana does the Cinderella story and pulls off this upset, the Denver Nuggets have the most wins against the Oklahoma City Thunder this season. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, for those that don't remember, are the most historically dominant regular season team of all time, according to a metric called SRS, which looks by how much they outscore their opponents by compared to their strength of schedule for their opponents, right? So basically, they outscore their opponents by 15 on average, but their opponents are on average -3 in large part because in large part OKC doesn't have to play OKC. So OKC is the most dominant regular season team of all time by that metric, and of course, I think is somewhere in that 5 to 10 region of records because it's 68-14. So, of course, there are only 270-win teams. There are 5 or 6 teams that have exceeded 10 in SRS, which OKC is a member of. OKC is the best. And I was like, this is the most dominant SRS, one of the most dominant SRS teams, and Denver has one of the best records against it. Surely, surely they are the best. I'm going to put this in weird phraseology, Brian, loser of all time, meaning they didn't win an NBA Finals, but they did the best against the team that went on to like win an NBA Finals. But Brian, guess what? I don't get that distinction for the Nuggets because guess which team did better against 10 plus SRS teams, get racking up more wins against an all-time great team in NBA history?
I mean, I can think of an obvious one: the Cavaliers with LeBron James chase down, but that might not
Not
be
quite.
it.
I mean, they won the finals, which is four, but they actually
Yeah.
got smacked in the regular season.
Oh,
But
okay.
that same team is the answer. The Golden State Warriors, who should have defeated the Cavaliers if not for injury, a topic we'll talk in just a second as well. En route to that, the Thunder played against the Spurs, another all-time great team. So
Forgot about
the
that.
season that the Warriors had 73 wins and were primed to be the winningest team of all time and fell in the NBA Finals. In that scenario, also, the Spurs were having a historic run. And so we have two of the best teams of all time, regular season, in the same season. Not only do they not play each other, that neither of them won a title, and OKC beat San Antonio 6 times that season. So if OKC wins, Denver's going to get the distinction of most wins against an all-time great team that won a title. But right now, if we're the only thing we know for certain, because we don't know who's won the title, is if we're looking at all-time wins against an all-time great team by a team that didn't win the title, OKC still has that title. So Denver couldn't even beat OKC in the consolation prize for their, Cinderella upset, which they didn't get, unfortunately.
Yeah, Denver always does well in the playoffs, and I think it's because of one of those old school fundamentals of wages of wins that we talk about, which is deeper teams do better in the regular season. They can rest their stars and just run more players out there. But teams with shallower rosters and better superstars will do better in the playoffs when the rosters shorten up. And when you have Jokic, who easily could have been MVP this year and probably would have been in any other year, and he's just going out there 40 plus minutes a game, like that, it just really helps, especially because OKC is one of those deep teams.
Yeah, that was. So here's the funny thing. Before the series started, I talked to a friend of the show, Ben Guest, and what I said, here's the thing. On paper, this is a joke, right? OKC is a plus 12 SRS team, which we have never seen before. This is the first plus 12 SRS team in NBA history. And I said, and the Denver Nuggets are like a three. The Denver Nuggets on paper are not even a title squad this year, let alone, this isn't a title squad running into an all-time great, something that used to happen with the Michael Jordan Bulls, right? Where it's like, yeah, you have a team that should win a title, but whoops, no. So I basically said, hey, they're not supposed to win, but you know what I would really love to have happen is I would love for Jokic to have a Wilt Chamberlain like. I use the phrase like because earlier in the season, I think Jokic had like a 30-20-20. Like he had like a 20-20-20 triple double, which is something we've not seen since I think maybe Westbrook has done it, but first time a center has ever done that. I think Wilt Chamberlain had like 30-20-15 or something. And by 30-20-15, I mean like 50-20-15, but I'm saying those are the benchmarks. But so I basically said, hey, if he can have a Wilt Chamberlain like game and we can steal one, then I'll be happy. Then we'll be good. And I basically got kind of both of those in the first game. He got a 42-point, 22 rebound win, 2-point win with here's what I love, Brian. It's got taken away from me, but I was fine with it. I want to call it the greatest alley-oop in NBA playoff history. Unfortunately, Jokic told the truth in the press conference. But what happened is Jokic shoots a buzzer beater to try. They're tied for what it's worth, but he shoots a buzzer beater to try and win the game from three. He misses. Aaron Gordon is right there, scoops the rebound, dunks the ball, buzzer beating like dunk. against the greatest team of all time, Brian. Like one of the greatest playoff plays of all time, of all time. And of course, later you and I were talking, and I was like, I'm counting that as an alley oop. And then unfortunately, a press conference person literally asked Jokic point blank, and he's like, "No, it was a miss." And I was like, "Ah." But still, one of the most glorious plays in Nuggets history. Exactly what I asked for, right? So I'm betting with house money at that point. I'm like, we're good. And then the Nuggets, they get so close, Brian. They lose a game. They were like leading in game four. They were so close. And it is so close. And we get to game seven. And I actually had this in my memory banks. I said, this is one of two things. This is either the Houston Rockets in 1993 or 1994, who, thanks to Clyde Drexler, came back and go on to the NBA Finals. And you could argue the Nuggets with health to Jamal Murray, with health to Russell Westbrook, with health to, um, I actually do want to say like Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. Maybe that was it. They were more banged up in the regular season. They get healthy in the playoffs and they go on. Or this looked to be the accurate one. They're the 2008 Atlanta Hawks. Because for those who don't remember, the Boston Celtics had one of the most dominant teams of all time in 2008. They go on to win the NBA Finals, including just an absolute thrashing of the Lakers in Game 6. But sees the first series of that playoffs goes to 7 against Atlanta, and you're like, nice try, Atlanta. But then Game 7, not like they're like, no, we're done messing around. And unfortunately for the Denver Nuggets, 30-point loss in Game 7. They're not the Houston Rockets. They're not David Robinson getting his or they're not Hakeem Olajuwon getting revenge for not winning MVP against David Robinson. They're the Atlanta Hawks, but I still got everything I wanted. But it is definitely funny, that change of expectation, right? Where I'm just like, I'm not expecting anything. This would be nice. I get that this is nice. I'm like, what if we win, Brian? What if we win, Brian? Am I going to have to drive, at the time I was thinking, to Indiana to watch Denver? That would have been a for sure thing, as an all ABA finals. Of course, I'm going to that, but that didn't happen. To suddenly be like, oh, they could win, and just the roller coaster of emotions of what could have been, where I started expecting literally nothing. I expected a 4-0 blowout in this series to start.
Yeah, and I think that's why people remember the game-winning shots so much, right? Is because the game's basically a tie. Almost anything can happen, and you remember that moment where the game can go either way, and you get game-winning shots. Like we've seen, yeah, in some of these series, Kawhi and all that. That was a great one. But I want to be slightly pedantic with you, Dre. I'm going to see if I can get somewhere with that.
Uh-oh, uh-oh,
So you said at the beginning of this that the Nuggets were closer to 3 in SRS, margin of victory.
uh-oh. Is it worse?
No, they're a little bit higher than that,
Oh,
actually.
4? Four's not bad.
3.89 margin of victory, 3.97 SRS, schedule adjusted, right? It looks slightly better because the West is tough. So. But here's the point that I want to bring this up, because it's another fundamental, right? When we're looking at the old school wages of win stuff, we have to talk about this. We haven't done a show in a while. Remind me who wrote this article. I think it was Arturo, maybe Ari Caroline. That if you look at all the past, NBA playoffs and championship teams, 50 wins regular season is the benchmark you need to be considered a contender. It turns
I
out for the
actually
Nuggets.
believe that. Sorry, I'll let you finish, but I will give the credit. I believe that's actually Mosey Platt,
Oh,
who
was it
did some of
really?
that.
Okay. See, he's even more old school.
Yeah.
The original, by the way, Wages of Wins podcaster, along with you. Um, but no, all my point is that that margin of victory maps exactly to 50 Pythagorean wins. And the Nuggets actually had 50 wins as well. So they had no good or bad luck, right? So I want to argue that the Nuggets just barely cleared that bar for being a title contender this year. And maybe that's why they were able to do better.
I think, to stay on the pedantry, that thanks to Mosey's team, the Miami
The
Heat,
Heat,
for
yeah.
those that thanks to the 2006 Heat is where we actually had seen a dip down to like 52 wins. Because I think after a certain era, after I want to say the 80s, once we get to a certain point, I think after the bad boy Pistons, that's when we do hit the 55 plus wins, right? The Bulls super teams. I think the Houston Rockets in 94 are always the anomaly, and the easy case is they traded mid-season
Yep.
for Clyde Drexler. So they
And
are
Jordan
missing
wasn't
the
playing that year.
yeah, and of course, that's the case too. Although we have talked with Greg Steele, a big Houston Rockets fan, so I'll give that caveat. But Greg Steele has noted that, the Bulls probably had they not done the pivot to Dennis Rodman, which was so, sorry to reuse the word pivotal, had they kind of stayed the course by that point, 94, they might have been out of gas. But who's to say? Who's
It's
to
so
know?
hard to say 30 years ago.
But yeah, that's pretty much the case, right? Is if we look at the Denver Nuggets. I
Wait,
think
sorry.
you're
Can I
right.
ask what? Can I just to finish that up? Is the conclusion that now the floor is higher than 50? You need to get to 52 or 55, or what?
I mean, that's the method that's kind of based on, which is like not official name, but I've seen say Bill James and sabermetricians use is the in a box method, where
Mm,
you basically start looking at stats and using benchmarks that you find. Like no player's gotten into the Hall of Fame with less than this, and you draw that, and less than this, boom. And you start drawing lines around the stats, and then when you are comparing, then you use that. So, when you're saying no NBA team has won an NBA finals with fewer than this wins, boink, and then fewer than this many like star players or whatever. And the thing about those is, I steal a quote from Spurs fan EJ Fisher. We're just giving a shout out to all old school wages of wins on this podcast
yeah.
today. Devin, too. If I forget to mention you, Devin,
Yep.
of course, Devin, because of course we wrote a lot of the same stuff there. But basically, EJ Fisher, Spurs fan, noted like the in a box works until it doesn't. Um, I will agree with you though, right? You're right. Like 4 versus 3, as silly as this sounds, is enough of a difference, right? Because like I want to say 4 SRS is close to I think some of those Spurs teams, like in maybe 2005 or six, right, that won, I want to say. So you're right where this gets really weird when we're sticking on that pedantry land, where the Denver Nuggets on paper look good enough to they the in a box they could in theory win a title. That being said, they are playing in a season with the greatest regular season team of all time with a freight train path pointed right at that regular season. In fact, to kind of wrap up some of the other games that or series that round of the playoffs, the Warriors was funny to me because Steph Curry got injured. Like the funny thing about that round of the playoffs, the conference semifinals, right,
Yep.
was the two boring repeat history stories were Cinderella team comes just short of an all-time great team, and injuries suck. Because the Golden State Warriors lose Steph Curry and then fall 4-1 to another team. Like it's also worth noting on paper, the Minnesota Timberwolves were really good. And I remember you wisely told me not to fall for bait, but I did, Brian. I think I on Blue Sky responded. I want to say Ira, who I think is a beat writer for Miami, so it makes sense why I'd have the anti.
Oh, Ira
But it was,
Winderman.
yeah, I think he had
Okay.
like after the season is over, the Jimmy Butler trade is definitely questionable for both sides, and I'm like, Golden State Warriors made the playoffs, upset the number 2 seed, made it to the second round. If Steph Curry doesn't get injured, they would have at least put up a fight to make the conference finals. Where hell, if the Denver Nuggets had upset the Oklahoma City Thunder, man, that would have, if those two things had happened together, Brian, um, if the Nuggets had upset the Thunder and then the Warriors had come through and snatched a finals from the Nuggets with that, I don't know how to respond it. But I mean, that was on the table until Curry got injured. And that's the thing. Pacers versus Cleveland. Tristan Thompson, I want to say, was injured. Mobley, didn't he win Defensive Player of the Year? I believe he was
I
injured a
believe so.
game.
I believe so.
Was injured a game. This was the exact problem we had noted about the Cavaliers last season, where we basically said, this is a contender on paper, but they need to get healthy. And this season, they got healthy in the regular season, won 64 games, first in their conference. And then when they get to the conference semifinals, they're beat up and injured. And then I think we also run into the shortened playoff thing that we've talked, right? Which is the Indiana Pacers 50-win team. I'm curious on their SRS. Their SRS much worse, right? Their SRS is 1.6, so they don't look, or 1.7. They don't look anything like a contender. But the easy cheat code they do have is in the regular season, Tyrese Halliburton's playing 33.6 minutes. All of their players
Yep.
kind of boost. And we do see just like an increase and a shortened bench, right? We see their top Halliburton, Siakam. I always mess up his name, but Andrew Nemhard, Miles
Yep.
Turner, who maybe Miles Turner looks better. Miles Turner has been very annoying to us where in past we've liked him, but he's been up and down. And then actually, Brian, funny story, he's playing well, but Obi Toppin, who
Yeah.
was the last subject of the last podcast we wrote a blog post for on boxscoregeeks.com
That's
with
right. His
Jonathan
photo's
Weiler.
up there on the front page still.
He bounced from New York, and Jonathan Weiler was like, this guy is really good. And unfortunately, I'll say injury is the name of the game. He has looked beat up on previous teams, but finally made it. I think he got injured like the next year or two on New York, but he gets to Indiana where he seems to be turning it around. So injury is the name of the game, and that's the other thing about the Celtics, the other team I want to bring up from that round as well, which is, you know, um, Jason Tatum. We have had two playoffs, I think both against Indiana, but Jason Tatum has gotten injured in two playoff series that have gotten cost. So it's a very funny world where I'm going to argue, yeah, three of these series were kind of dictated by injury. I think Minnesota on paper was supposed to win, but were extra supposed to win as soon as you remove Steph Curry from the equation. And Denver just like put up a big fight because they have the MVP, but it's the story we knew. And that is the only question I wanted to ask you there, though, is before the playoffs, we kind of discussed the Nuggets firing their coach.
Mm.
I went with conventional wisdom. I was like, why are you going to introduce uncertainty and chaos into a locker room going into the playoffs where you have an MVP player? And you made the counter argument where you said, hey, if you've got an MVP player, you have a limited number of chances in the playoffs. And to be fair, the Nuggets were gambling with house money, right? They weren't supposed to beat the Thunder by any means. There was no team. They weren't supposed to beat the Thunder. They were not better than the Houston Rockets. They were like on paper really close to Minnesota. So the other teams that were supposed to make the second round, they weren't supposed to win. They were supposed to be a second round team, and they almost went further. Do you think the coaching change, the good bet didn't matter? This could have happened anyway. Seems to have mattered. They performed really well. Or weird case with Malone, they would have advanced.
No, I mean, you know me. I'm never gonna give the coach too much credit or criticism. But yeah, that argument, I can't remember where I heard it. I think it was it might have been the DNVR podcast. I don't know, some Nuggets related thing. And they basically said, look, we got nothing to lose at this point. We're either going to get our ass kicked in the playoffs or we're going to try something different. So we're going to go with a different coach. And also, we talked about this a little bit when that went down, the Malone firing. It wasn't just Malone, it was also Calvin Booth, the GM. And it was the whole organization, the relationship between Booth and Malone, and just apparently, yeah, the whole organization got sick of both of those guys, and so did all the players. So in that kind of situation, yeah, I think it's fine to just move ahead right there, because if you just decide, look, this is what they say in a divorce proceeding, right? Right, irreconcilable differences. If it's irreconcilable differences, why wait? Just go ahead with it. And that being said, I don't think the coaching change is what spurred them on to almost upset Oklahoma City. It was probably just a wash. The continuity versus the change is good.
And that's the other thing. A couple of bounces, and this is a 4-0 series, right? They go to overtime. It wouldn't be shocking for OKC to have just run away with that overtime. There was a double overtime win too, as well. So it's just like it's this series might have been closer than it appeared. It might have been luckier than it appeared, right? This could be in 100 simulations, there were maybe three scenarios where the Nuggets win three or more games, and we got to see one of them, which was special. Um, and then that brings us to the other coach firing, which is this gets interesting. And by the way, there are two stories that collide. One you already kind of said. The shortened playoff rotation. I'm looking at the New York Knicks versus the Boston Celtics. So Coach Thibodeau, Thibs, notoriously known for playing players long minutes as if it's the 80s and not the age of rest.
Yeah.
And so if we look at the Knicks, we have Bridges, Brunson, Anunoby, and Hart all getting over 36 minutes, with Bridges getting over 40. Ridiculous. When we hop over to the Celtics, the only player that played over 40 minutes was Tatum, but then he got injured. And then we have Derek White, Jaylen Brown as the next two. And so the obvious answer between those two is the Knicks had multiple stars, right? We thought Josh Hart was an MVP caliber player. On our ballot, it would have gone, because I'm a Nuggets homer, so I'll stick that. I would have been in the 30%, Brian. So Jokic lost 30% to 70% to Shea Gilgeous, which I'm fine with. I thought it would be closer to 70 or 60-40. You notice like voter fatigue explains a lot, which is fine. I would have done Jokic, Shea, Hart as R3, and then I really don't care. You know, Giannis is fine, whatever. I like Brunson, why not? Halliburton, and I'm just listing favorites. I'm not listing like productive players at this point. Well, the point being, Hart is one of the underrated greats according to our numbers. He is a like small forward that rebounds like a big and just does everything else right. Like he only, I'll put in quotes, gets 15 points a game, but he gets 15 points a game on efficient shooting on a team that doesn't need him to be the primary scorer. They have Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. You don't want Josh Hart taking all the shots. You want Josh Hart taking efficient shots and getting the ball back with those hyper efficient players. We are in love with Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. Like, I absolutely love the fact, in kind of a mean way, Brian, that between New Orleans, I'm hoping I'm getting it right. Yeah, New Orleans, um, Dallas, and Minnesota, you have three players that those teams really should have kept. And Josh Hart, I like as my proof of example why you can never trade a star. Those for those that don't remember, the trade that acquired Anthony Davis to the Lakers, Josh Hart was on the other side. And a question you and I had, very similar to Tyrese Halliburton, who we'll be talking more soon, is you're like, could the Lakers have held on to Hart? And we thought, well, maybe New Orleans was savvy and they realized just how good Hart was. And of course, nope, Hart leaves. So it's like anytime a team trades a superstar and they get back some good players, and we're like, oh, maybe Josh Hart helps offset it. Maybe Vanderbilt helps offset. It's like, no, they're gone. They're gone. They don't realize it. So I really do love the fact that the New York Knicks were a discard pile of underrated players, which is weird to say it in the case of, say, Karl Anthony Towns, a number one pick who won Rookie of the Year over Nikola Jokic. It's weird to call them underrated, but they absolutely are. It was fantastic to see them get that far. But now we're going to get to the question, Brian. New York Knicks defeat the reigning champions. Finished, you would argue, right? They finished third, right? If I'm not mistaken, third in their conference. And as a result, this is like weird pedantry. They fall to the Indiana Pacers in six. So arguably they're ranked third in their conference. Their final record, if we're going by Royal Rumble metrics as to when they were eliminated, they finished second. They get to the end of that, and Coach Thibodeau is shown the door.
Yeah, it's wild. The most obvious thing to say is those, last game or two against the Pacers, they look gassed. They look really tired. And, that I was thinking about that Thibodeau factor you talking about earlier. Was all those 40-minute games in the regular season part of their downfall? So yeah, and the other thing is I really like this roster. I've been complaining all year, or more confused all year. Like, I thought that they would have been one of those number one or two seeds, along with the Celtics or maybe the Cavs. I didn't think they would be third and far third behind those two. I thought they would be. I thought they would have better regular season. So it kind of made some sense to me. I haven't read about the details yet, but I'll just say this: it's the same thing with Malone. You just got to go to the players and talk to them all and figure out what they need, right? Maybe they need another year of Thibodeau, maybe they don't. and I would guess there was, you know, some players that might have wanted, a change of scene because again, Thibodeau is one of those hard, grinded out coaches. Those guys are known to have a shelf life in a certain location.
100%. And also, just on that note, you and I love this subject, the weirdness of the NBA and professional sports as compared to a normal business. So, a regular business where people are there a while, you get stock options in the company. There's usually seniority, so they're usually kind of expected promotions, et cetera, right? In the NBA, if you stick around long enough, you are literally kind of expected to train your replacement. And that gets weird. You are directly competing with other people on your team for playing time. Exactly what you were saying with coaches. Over time, the longer you're on a team, eventually those motivational speeches and things don't work. You've heard them a million times. You're tuning them out.
Yeah.
Now you've also got beef, right? Like that's probably one of the most impressive things I will actually say about the Golden State Warriors, up there with, say, the Bulls of old, is you have these big personalities that have history with each other that at a moment's notice could probably be like, well, you said this, well, you did that, and somehow able to keep it together. But over time, that loses it, right? If you yet like the Popovich effect that eventually, I think it worked with Tim Duncan. I think Tim Duncan was kind of immune to it, was able to tune out Popovich, but Popovich with modern stars like well, Marcus Aldridge, pains me to call him a modern star, but at least by pay, Brian, he counted. And Kawhi is like, hey, you've been yelling at me for 5 years, and I don't like having 5 years, 10 years, whatever. I'm tired of having someone yell at me all the time. And you're right, Thibodeau is known as a grinded out player. And this season went long. So I could see the players going like, yeah, we did great in the playoffs, but if we want to get back here, we need the same core, and the same core doesn't want to deal with this person. So that is what always makes sports so weird to watch for me because it is not normal, right? I think I've stolen this line from you, Brian, but you have said repeatedly, in a normal job, that gets you fired. In sports, it's expected, right? In a normal job, a coach at halftime walking into the locker room and destroying something and being like, what are we doing here? And yada, yada, yada. And later we hear in interviews, oh, he really riled us up and he called us out and he got us accountable and that got in so and so's head and he went off and scored 20 in the second half. And that's why we won. Like, if you and I talking back to back were like, yeah, yesterday I was at work and my boss got really mad and went into the break room and like trashed the microwave, we would be talking about like how awkward it was that the boss got walked to HR today. So sports is weird is my kind of thesis statement as we talk Malone and Thibodeau firing.
Yeah, and I'm speculating. I mean, that's just how it usually goes, right? And that's how it's gone with Thibodeau in the past. The only solid rumors, and that's kind of an oxymoron, right? A solid rumor, but something that's out there in the news anyway is that they're really trying to swing for the fences. They're trying to poach coaches that are already hired. They're trying to get Chris Finch, the Minnesota coach. They got shut down by that. They're trying to get Jason Kidd from the Mavericks. Are they going to offer draft pick compensation? Like, who knows? So this could just be the Knicks being the Knicks. And even though they've managed to build a good team that I really like, their front office, Leon Rose is the GM. He's kind of an enigmatic figure because he doesn't really give interviews. But obviously the ownership is weird though. So yeah, I guess this is to be continued. Let's see what happens with the Knicks. They're gonna have to decide, do they want to keep this roster together or trade somebody? Do they want to go back with two centers again with Mitchell Robinson and Towns? They may not, so we'll see. Just one last thing on this. You mentioned the Warriors at the beginning of that. Someone wrote this. I want to say it was Marcus Thompson. He who literally wrote the book on Stephen Curry. He's one of the old school Warriors beat writers in the Bay Area and is known to be close to Curry. And I think what he wrote about Steph is that his biggest superpower as a star is the ego side of it, is being able to fit all these people and coaches, and players into the team and be able to absorb all this craziness from Draymond Green and Kevin Durant fighting with him and all that, and that Steph Curry is the one who keeps it all together, right? And yeah, I mean, if more star players were able to do that, they would do better. I think that is one of his best abilities.
That's I mean, in Kerr as well. I mean, like
Yes.
it's worth noting Kerr's backstory before the Warriors. For those that don't know, Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors, right? We all know him for that. If you're a youngin and don't know this, Brian and I do because he's from our era. Steve Kerr played with the Bulls and has one of the best shots in playoff history as
Yep.
well as follow-ups, which is Steve Kerr gets a game-winning shot from a pass from MJ. And then later, when he's interviewed about it, he's joking. He's saying, Phil Jackson called the play for MJ, and MJ said, I don't know if I can do it. And
That's right.
And then Steve Kerr says, so I said, well, here I go. I have to bail out MJ again. Notoriously got in a fight with MJ in a practice and then like won him over. So again, like to your point, the coach of the Warriors and the star player of the Warriors both had this superpower and when we're analytics people, so the things we analyze, we get accused of going for the numbers and ignoring things, but the things that fascinate me aren't these intangibles that people talk about that I often don't disregard, but are kind of like that those don't matter as much as you think they do. They call them immeasurables. I'm like, they're hard to measure, but we can measure the magnitude and they're still measurable and they're still not that big. But things like you're saying, for a franchise, for a dynasty to exist, requires personalities that are super rare. And Steve Kerr and Steph Curry are two players that do this. And a weird, just to like stay in this land, because I know this is near and dear to both you and our hearts, and we both love it. But like, I think there is something truly fascinating to the fact that Steph Curry followed around his dad, Del Curry, who was a fantastic 3-point shooter and a big enough name, but was definitely not a star player in the NBA. He was, that second rung. And he also followed him around when he was playing next to Muggsy Bogues, an undersized player, but one of the most productive era. And he was following them around during the shortened 3-point line. So there is this weird, like, perfect training period time that Steph Curry got that might be impossible for any NBA player to get, right? To get the attitudes of what does the NBA look like for a non-star player but also learn the importance of a three and also learn the importance of like how to be an effective point guard from, Muggsy Bogues, pound for pound, is the best NBA player of all time. 100 wins produced at 5'3". That is
Yeah.
one of the most ridiculous feats in sports.
Yeah, if you've never seen him play, it doesn't seem like it could be a real thing, but it was. He was great on defense. Like he would just get in there and get steals. Obviously, they would try to post him up, but he was great. I was kind of thinking about what you were just saying a few years ago. Just sort of what it did take for Steph Curry to get to where he is now, to be the all-time leader in, three-pointers made and up there in percentage and just no question the best three-point shooter ever, right? And I don't remember his exact age. I think he's 37 right now is what I want to guess, roughly, maybe 36 or 38. Let's say he's 37. Dre, I would speculate that in the history of the world, nobody has shot more three-pointers at age 37, game and gym and practice combined, than Steph Curry. Like I think since he was just a little kid, like you said, in there with his dad in the gym, he's just been shooting threes the whole time. And famously, he has these intense workouts even during the off season. Even during the season, he'll do workouts when he's got to have a game to prepare for. I think he's just put up so many shots that he's the best.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those like if you could ask a genie or something like how many 3-point shots just total has Steph Curry taken and what's the spot between number one and number two? Because the French Open just happened, you and I have both been watching a little
Yeah.
tennis, and I recall you and I have talked this a lot, Pete Sampras's record. So Pete Sampras, when he retired, had 14 majors, which was a record and like at the time looked like a stupid record. The majors in tennis, for those that don't know, there are 4 major tournaments a year. So every year you have a chance to win 4. Winning 14 of them, as you can guess, is a big, big, big deal. And Pete Sampras was the all-time with 14, and second place was 11. Easy player to compare this to is Reggie Miller, and then maybe right after Ray Allen. And you're just like, wow. You look at Reggie Miller's threes, you look at Ray Allen's threes, you're like, incredible. how will anybody touch this? And Steph Curry came by. I'll look up the numbers really quick in the background just to give you like a sense of perspective. But Steph Curry came by and torched it. And then, of course, not quite the same in tennis, but in tennis, we had Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic all come by and get 20 majors like in the next
Mm.
in the like immediately after. So it's the same thing. Like Steph Curry literally enters the league right after Reggie Miller exits, right when Ray Allen is still playing, and just basically goes, yeah, no, this is mine. Like it's not even close. And by the way, the number is holy cow, Brian, this is ridiculous. Steph Curry has 4,058 made three-pointers in the NBA at the moment. Second place is James Harden with like 3,158. So again, there's like almost 1,000 gap between the two. And at retirement, both Reggie Miller and Ray Allen were below 3,000. And then if we're looking like total taking, because that was kind of what you were talking, and I'm just looking regular season, Steph Curry is at 9,589. He is going to be the first player to ever crack 10,000 threes attempted in the NBA. James Harden could still do it. Damian Lillard could potentially do it. Damian Lillard is third with 7,556. But Damian Lillard's also getting old, injured, got beat up in the playoffs, right? So it's possible Steph Curry becomes the first and only player in NBA history to crack 10,000 threes. And we're kind of at the point, right, where as I'm going over the list and looking at active players, we're not going to see a player do this because for at least a decade, because you have to take, like, even if you take 10 threes a game, that's 800 threes a season. It would take you 10 plus years to get there. And no active player that is young is anywhere close. Like Donovan Mitchell has 4,419.
Just think about what he had to do. Like, not just he had to figure out how to get to where he is now, and no one had done it before. And what I mean by that is it wasn't just taking more threes than anyone else, like I was saying, having more practice, having this great advantage of his dad and all that. He also had to develop new techniques that had just never been done before, right? Taking these step back threes, taking these side step threes. You know, James Harden and others are doing them as well. Taking the long, deep threes, like only him and Lillard and kind of, Trey Young, but he's not as good. Here's a comparison I'm trying to think of. Uh, Clean energy, renewable energy is a massive thing right now, right, Trey? We're worried about the environment, all that. We need to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. And there's this thing in engineering where, I mean, it's more than engineering, it's like a whole ecosystem. But the point is, if we were going to get to 90% clean energy and 10% fossil fuels, that takes a ton of work, but it would have a big benefit, right? If we were to go to 95% clean energy and 5% fossil fuels, the amount it takes to go that extra 5% at the end is just infinitely more difficult, right? These are the really tough problems that take even more time and money and effort to figure out. And so going from 95 or 97, maybe we can do it someday, but the really big thing is using the resources we have. My point is, you can see how this compares to Steph Curry, right? He put in that, almost 2 or 3 times more time than he needed just to do these extra edge case things that no one had ever done before to give him like this extra few percentage points advantage. Like, it's an incredible sports story, is all I'm trying to say.
And then, I mean, I remember it in real time where, so I'm looking over his numbers now, of course. And in 2015, he wins his first MVP and he's shooting 8 threes a game at 44%. And by all measures, that's 26 years old. If we're talking the age curve, he's there. He has answered a question we were worried about, which was injury, because thing that
Yeah.
really benefited the Warriors was in
Yes.
season 3 of a rookie season, Steph Curry only plays 26 games. The question is, can Steph Curry stay healthy? So this was a fun stat for me, Brian, because it was around the same time as there was I'm just dropping his name, but there was a Denver Nuggets guard that I really liked, and then unfortunately did just get bounced from the league due to like substance abuse. And I will get his name because this is
Oh,
going to drive me nuts if I
I don't
can't remember
remember.
it. But they were similar in like drafts, right? So they were picked around the same time. Ty Lawson. So Ty Lawson and Steph Curry had very similar like salaries for the same reason because Steph Curry got re-signed with the Warriors for this cheap contract because of his health. And then he stays healthy and we're like, holy cow, good job. We're like, you have peaked. This was at age 26 and he wins his first MVP. The next season, he increases his threes by 3 attempts a game, somehow increases his efficiency, jumps to 30 points a game, and had that like second jump as you were talking about, which was like all the difference. So agreed. The Steph Curry, sorry to stay in tennis land, but I've been listening to tennis interviews. I was listening to John McEnroe talk about how he had one of the greatest seasons in 1984 on the Andy Roddick podcast. And this is bizarre to me. Andy Roddick, phenomenal US tennis player that is probably now the best tennis podcaster. Didn't see that coming, but makes sense. Looks like Stifler from the American Pie movies. One of the most bizarre things ever. But he was talking to McEnroe, and McEnroe had one of the greatest seasons ever. And he said, in hindsight, he wished he could have gone back in time and said, "You got to push harder. You got to keep going, right? Like, don't rest on your laurels being number one." And again, 2015, Steph Curry wins MVP, wins the NBA title, and what does he do? He comes back even harder and is taking more threes. And even this last season, 11.2 threes a game at age, as you're pointing out, I think he turned 37 this year, just like he's still at age 37, still doing it.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the Warriors did have to improve during their run, right? This is one of the weirdest things. It makes some sense, but they were the best offense in the league a lot of those years, or, top three or top five in some cases. And they were doing it with what would today be considered very poor shot selection. They have Curry and Kevin Durant and even other guys like Sean Livingston at the time that can make mid-range shots. So they took a lot of mid-range shots. And then teams like, Maury's Rockets and some other teams start taking more threes than them and they start catching up in offense with better shot selection, right? So the Warriors now are finally a team that takes more threes and are kind of a more modern offense. But yeah, it's easy to forget that they took a lot of long twos in those days.
The rough reality was moving on from Klay Thompson that held him back. And I stress this that I'm very conflicted there. The exact thing we were talking about, how it's weird to say this person is a good coach because they yell at their players to get them fired up and wreck things, right? That we still lionize people like Bob Knight. That's weird to me. It's weird to me to say Klay Thompson, who was a pivotal part of the first couple of titles, to say, hey, he's old, he's beat up, you should move on. I kind of hate that because I kind of like the idea of him saying, I contributed to your success. I would like to still get paid well. I would, because that's how things would normally work. You get stock you were a founder in the company, you get stock in the company goes up in value. And this has happened to the Warriors. The Warriors went for being sold for in the ballpark of like 450 million, and they're worth in the billions now, right? Like every NBA team is. So it's like in a normal world, Klay Thompson would be able to reap the benefits of that. Sports is different. You're not allowed to own the team. But that moving on from Klay Thompson, that moving into to Jimmy Butler, all of the difference in the world. It'll be weird to see where they go in the future. But I mean, they do have a decent core. And of the squads out there, they're the ones I trust a little more, in part because of the Curry. Like as long as Curry can stay around as kind of a statesman, even if he loses a little bit of a step, which he did this season, right? He got injured too, but he's still productive. I think they're fine. But I also just the easy answer, as we're kind of winding towards the finals now, right? Is it's just really hard to win a title in the NBA. If your goal is a title, you are going to be disappointed because it is really, really hard. And sometimes you can have the best team. You can have the Houston Rockets who would win a title most years and they run into the Golden State Warriors, right? So that can happen. But we do have the title squad, and we do have a funny scenario, Brian, where, as I've mentioned, I got to see the Denver Nuggets win an NBA title with my son, game five, a couple years ago. Didn't do anything for Boston, didn't have a reason to do anything for Boston. Um, Happy they won it though. But now we're in a situation where I am close enough. I'm 6 hours away from Indiana, where if they force it to a game six, I can justify going to Indiana with my son because my son got to see the Denver Nuggets win. And it's like If it's a game deciding game six, Brian, I think I'll go. If it's not game, I think the answer is if it's not game deciding. So here's the scenario, Brian. If it is, I guess it would always have to be game deciding, right? If it's going to game six, it would have to be 3-2. There's no other
If it's a game
combination.
six, there's always one
It's
team
yeah,
that
there's
can win
always
it.
a team. So it
Yeah.
has to be game deciding. So never mind. That's weird math. Game five can't doesn't have to be, but game six has to be. They're going into a game six, game deciding game, series deciding game. I kind of have to go and would be fascinating to go. And there's a couple other funny stories. I think I've shared some with you. I was in Los Angeles visiting a friend, and there is a vintage clothes shop in Los Angeles near Burbank. So I don't know if you count them the same, whatever. But in Burbank, there's a vintage clothes store that buys movie like used clothes from movie props. And so there is a television show called The Upshaws with Wanda Sykes that takes place in Indiana. That's been going for years on Netflix. This is the modern world, Brian. I had never heard of this show, looked it up.
There's a lot of
Quick.
Netflix shows, Trey.
Exactly right. There's so much stuff I don't know about. I've had that experience with my kid, like find a toy at, Goodwill, and I'm like, oh, this toy is $2. I'll buy it. And then go home and look it up. And I'm like, oh, this is from a show that's been on the air 10 years and is highly regarded and everybody knows. And I've literally never heard of it. That's the modern world. It's very funny what happens when you don't just have three networks like back in the day when the NBA got big with Bird and Magic. So Indiana Pacers, the upshows. I bought an Indiana Pacers shirt because I didn't bring enough clothing on my trip. I like was off by one. And I was like, I just need a shirt to wear home on the last day of the trip. Found an Indiana Pacers shirt, was like sold, found the show it was from. I wore that shirt home on my last day of the trip. On the trip home, Indiana Pacers were playing and they won. And I'm like, I think I'm kind of an Indiana Pacers fan. So if the Pacers make game six, I have to wear that shirt in Indiana, I think. If all the stars align, like if the tickets spike dramatically from where they're at now and they're not cheap now, I might have to pass. But like that's the fear is Indiana going to push it to game six, or was the game one Tyrese Halliburton is not a star comeback? And the few lines there, Brian, are God, I love Stephen A. Smith when he sticks his foot in his mouth. And I know he doesn't care. I know it's clickbait. I know he wins anyway because he gets the
Yep.
eyeballs and that's what he's going for. But Stephen A. Smith in the middle of the like 2 rounds ago. So I don't even know if it was New York, but a couple rounds ago was just like, a couple superstar moments doesn't make Tyrese Halliburton a star. And then, of course, this happens. And I was just like, chef's kiss, ages beautifully. And then, of course, the other Tyrese Halliburton moment that I love, Brian, he was snubbed is for Eastern Conference player, like the Larry Bird Award, right?
Mm.
The Larry Bird Award goes to Pascal, not because of yay points. It should have gone to Jalen Brunson if you were going that route, in my opinion. But it goes to Pascal. And I was just like, Pascal's number, right? Sorry for the lame pun. And there's a clip of like Tyrese standing up to get it, but then doesn't go his way. And so I've also been joking like, hey, what happens if the Pacers win the finals? They win the title. Tyrese Halliburton though um, doesn't win Finals MVP. Heck, it goes to Pascal Siakam again.
That would be wild. I mean, there is, I think there's recency bias on finals voting, right? If someone makes a game-winning shot at the end, in the last game, they're probably gonna forget about the early games a little bit more. Yeah, I guess if there's a sweep, maybe that could be. But assuming this goes to like 5 or 6 games, there's probably a lot more to be written on the MVP.
It's gonna
But
be. It's likely gonna be Shea. Like I'm willing to bet if you go to DraftKings,
oh,
FanDuel, it's
sure,
probably
yeah,
like
because
90%.
OKC, even though they're on the road in Game 3, I think they're still a massive favorite, betting favorite. So people think they're going to win, and Shea's their best player, so he's going to be MVP. That's definitely the obvious choice. Um, and then, yeah, if you're just thinking about betting, your point is right. Siakam is going to split the votes. I'm not really sure about who I'm rooting for, though, because I guess I do like your point that it would be nice to see. Well, this is not your point from recently, from years ago. It's nice to see the great teams be great. It'd be nice to see Oklahoma City finish off this title and crown themselves, as the best team of all time, because it's going to happen. If they lose, then people are going to say the regular season was fraudulent, even though we don't agree with them. That's going to happen. So it'd be nice to see that, but in some ways, I almost like Halliburton more than Shea as a player. I don't know. I don't think he's better, but he's just kind of more interesting with his funny looking shot and his extremely trolling trash talk. The way he trash talks is kind of interesting. So they're both compelling figures. Yeah, I'm gonna enjoy Game 3 tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything can happen, but I mean the other easy answer, this is recency bias, is the Indiana Pacers were down 15 like at the start of the fourth.
Yep.
And this I will shout out, I think we've shouted him out a couple times already, but let's go back to Arturo Galletti. Years ago, Arturo Galletti noted that if we looked at point margin in the NBA, it's artificial. And by that, what he means is you should not have a 10-point margin of victory as your average, especially as teams have gotten better at threes. And the issue legitimately turns into, hey, our coaches pulling stepping off the gas too soon because teams can come back. And I've also noticed that it's not a shocker, but Arturo's team, the Celtics, figured this out. The Celtics are one of the teams that I think is an analytics team and has learned the lesson of the Oakland A's of like, if your shit doesn't work in the playoffs, don't freak out. So, it's like they're content to be like, we got injured. We'll get him next year. The Celtics have consistently been in the playoffs year after year after year after year. And they kind of get it. And they also got like under Brad Stevens, hey, don't give up when you're losing, right? Arturo has brought that up. And when we were talking actually about Thibodeau and New York looking gassed come the end of the series against Indiana, I think that's a valid point. But here's the annoying choice. If Indiana tries to save some for the conference finals against Boston, do they lose against Boston and never get a chance? Like play like there's no tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm going to stick with the argument where I'm okay with that. But then we already had this discussion, but then I'm also conflicted because the cost of that may be that you literally burned through a coach, that now the players never want to see this person that got them through that playoff series because they like had to kill themselves to get there. And then of course fell just short, which is absolutely rough. So that's really like the question of where we're looking at with the finals about what can happen. And I guess I was saying like the pull off the gas is you look at OKC. If OKC, they didn't start their starters in the fourth and they kind of let Indiana get back into it. Now I'm using Popcorn Machine if you're not aware of this site. So Popcorn Machine,
Beautiful site.
they have game flows and Popcorn Machine has been a whatever on Blue Sky, retweeting, reskeeting, whatever you want to. I hate skeet. It just doesn't work. I can say tweet, I guess, kind of make it ubiquitous to like
Yeah,
Kleenex or
to
whatever.
me, Dre, Skeet, 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 that's a Lil Jon song and it's kind of pornographic. I don't know where that came from for Blue Sky. That's weird. That's
But
weird.
yeah, I mean, they still to a degree did this in the last series. So I mean, actually, it's more like they played their game and were fine. And the other one, they still had their starters sitting to start the fourth. To be fair, they were up by like 20 in the fourth, not 15. So I was looking to see if like OKC did say, hey, we're not benching. But as an example, Shea played the entire third quarter. Shea played the entire third quarter. They get to the end of the third quarter up like 20. They're like, no, we're not letting you get into the fourth quarter under 15. So I mean, I think that's just the thing is that if OKC is focused, eyes on the ball, the narrative people were having was the Houston Rockets versus the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic with Penny Hardaway and Shaquille O'Neal. And actually, who do I want to say? It was Nick Anderson and Horace Grant. Horace Grant from the
Yeah.
Bulls. They were
What year
set.
was that? Like 95 or 96,
I
something like
think that
that?
was 90. Wasn't that 93? That was
Really,
that was the
that
yeah.
that
I
was
know, right?
Penny's rookie year, 93.
That might have been it. I'll look that up just to verify. But I guess what I was going to say is
Could have been. He was
what
good.
they were expected to win. Everybody's like, I guess it would have been you were right, 94. But
Well, I said
they were
95, so we were both wrong.
okay. So I think I was thinking, oh no, oh wait, Brian, oh no, you are correct. I thought they were different years. It was 95 because it was the confluence. The Orlando Magic thought they were supposed to win. So Brian's right. Let's put it on the board, judges. Brian got that correct. Dre confused him. I used to have a term in college named after me for being the person confident in trivia who shouted the wrong answer. So Brian, I just did that again. You got it right.
Well,
In 19,
I wasn't sure. That was not a very confident answer, but the way I remember it was, yeah, Penny Hardaway came in and then a year or two later is when they got Horace Grant. and finally went on that run. But maybe I'm mixing it up anyway.
But yeah, but what happened in that series is the Houston Rockets are better than they appear because of Clyde Drexler. The Orlando Magic have just been destroying the playoffs, are a fantastic team. This is our year. Not only are we supposed to win, we are supposed to win and dominate, right? We got a young Shaq, we got a young Penny Hardaway. Jordan is gone. We are the next Bulls. And in the first game, the Houston Rockets come in and win by two. And then Houston just like is in Orlando's head, and Orlando like kind of psychologically can't recover. And so that was the thing is, oh, could this happen again? Did Indiana get in OKC's head, this young team? Because that was the other narrative we've been fed, right? Is
Yeah.
OKC's a young team. And so how can a young team win? And my answer is just like, that's actually how good Luka Doncic was last year, which is why all of us should shut the hell up about the Lakers, because I do legitimately think Luka Doncic is going to win a finals MVP in a couple of years. Just put a pin in that, Brian. That's my 2 cent note.
Alongside
Um,
43-year-old LeBron James, I'd love to see
43.
that. Yeah.
LeBron James, when they pick up what's it called? Let's go for Giannis. I think yeah, Giannis
Oh,
winds up in
okay.
LA.
Yeah,
Sure,
he's
why
available.
not?
So is Kevin Durant. We'll be talking about
That's
that.
what everybody's been in the
Yeah.
offseason. We'll get to that, and the sad news on yeah, we said we weren't going to talk about it, so I'll save it for later. But yeah, that exact point. The narrative was, could the Indiana Pacers pull the Houston Rockets? And the answer thus far seems like no, but will seem very silly after night. And Brian, that seems like a perfect spot to like start transitioning to the end of things, which is, hey, by the way, I've got WNBA numbers half ready. That's kind of obnoxious to say, but what I mean is I can generate them. Now I need to find a way to host them. I need to talk to Patrick or get them out somewhere. The fun thing, by the way, for those looking for stories. So obviously Caitlin Clark got all the fever last year. I love I those some of the stupidest articles, by the way, Brian, on the fever. And by the way, I should actually say, do you have anything to end the NBA playoffs, NBA finals on before
Oh,
we wrap up with
I
WNBA?
was gonna say one thing. Sorry, what was the very last team you were talking about?
I was talking, yeah, obviously was just talking Houston versus Orlando and comparing that to OKC, and people saying OKC
Yeah.
was too young to win, and I'm just like, no, they just ran into Luka Doncic on
Yeah.
an absurd run last year.
So I think the way, in terms of the, how much gas and brakes do you want to have? Shout out to Jacob Fatu, by the way, from California now, hugely over in WWE, and his catchphrase is all gas, no brakes. Good to see the local guy get there. He's from Sacramento, but I think it's more about the regular season, right? I think at this point, um, the coaches, maybe some of them are trying to limit the star players' minutes, but I don't think they're successful. I think the stars are just like, I'm going out there 40 minutes and I'm giving it every drop of gas that I have left in the tank. I think with coaches like Thibodeau, it's more like, well, he might have ran out the gas tank earlier, way back earlier in the season. So I think at this point, everyone's going all in. I don't think the Pacers could have done anything different, is what I'm trying to say.
No, yeah, completely fair. And like I said, I think it was just OKC. It might have been the classic thing is like keep your eye on the prize. It ain't over till it's over. And it seems like they learned their lesson.
Because
And
that's what load management is about, right? You're trying to, hold off. Like, you're a runner or a horse, at the starting gate of the race. You're like, you're getting ready. And then, you just go all in for the playoffs. I think that's how they do it with load management.
By the way, I am laughing over at NBA.com. Nemherd talking about guarding Shea Gilgeous-Alexander did describe it as a job with no breaks. And so I want to get the thing you said, Jacob, is it Fatu?
Jacob Fatu, yeah. He's a member of the famous, it's kind of an associate, a related family to the Anawais, you know, um, Roman Reigns and The Rock and all those guys. So he's kind of, yeah.
Absolutely.
He has got relatives that are pro wrestlers.
So I'm hoping that Pascal Siakam is a fan of his. That would be hilarious to find that out.
Yeah.
So, like I said, though, but by the way, we are running into WNBA time, which is fantastic. And what I'll say is, first off, we have a great thing going on right now, which is I would expect the Lynx are out for revenge. The Lynx came this close to winning an NBA title. I am here's where I'm conflicted, Brian. Okay, let me lay this out for you. No secret, Dave Barry is a fan of the Lynx. Lynx are awesome. Lynx are a wages of wins team. As an example, they have Nafisa Collier. I'm gonna start learning the names, which is good. I think I
Nafisa,
did
yeah.
okay. Who was this is really weird because she was drafted six. We were talking pre-show about this, but in WNBA terms, because of how small the league is, that is falling out of the draft lottery. That is unacceptable. The Lynx knew what was up though, drafted her, is one rookie of the year, has come second in MVP voting last year. Asia Wilson, just that remarkable. Okay. So the Lynx, not only are they a great team, they're undefeated right now. They have wages of wins players that we love. They are on a revenge tour because they lost the finals to the New York Liberty last year. Brian, I auto drafted in my WNBA fantasy league, and I fell into Brianna Stewart because Asia Wilson was so hot last year. Caitlin Clark was the big hotness. Funny story on that in a mean way. Caitlin Clark was drafted by last year's winner in our WNBA fantasy league, and she got injured. So I got a win against him. It is so misleading because I won by 30 and Clark was out the entire week we played because it's a
What are the
week long.
totals in that league roughly? What do you need to win usually?
It varies the first week. So the other undefeated player on the opposite conference, so we're in opposite conferences. We're both 3-0 right now. It's a head-to-head league. He got 1,000 the first week when they had a bunch of
Oh,
games.
so 30 is not much at all.
30, yeah, 30 points. The week I had the high score that week of all the teams at about 400. There were fewer games played. Sometimes WNBA is interesting because it's only 40 games, not 82. And depending on what else is going on, they'll change the games up to, for instance, not compete against the WNBA in some playoff scenarios. So last week, like I had the high score in the like low 400s, but I won, against a guy by not that much. And I'm just like, oh yeah, if Caitlin Clark had played, um, I lose, which is fair. And the other player that is also 3-0, he was I would have beaten him last week, but he's had some great players. A player on LA, I can look up her name in just a second, but
Which position?
it's
Kelsey
Alyssa
Plum,
Thomas.
the point
It's
guard. Oh,
Alyssa
Alyssa
Thomas
Thomas. Okay.
on Phoenix, not LA. And he also
Oh,
has a player in
Phoenix.
LA. Yeah, Phoenix is not LA. But the reason I was thinking that he has two players that are injured. So actually, this is the misleading part.
Shout out to Diana Taurasi, Dre. She
Oh yeah,
retired after
the tie.
20 something years. Her first year not on the Phoenix in a while. Yeah.
Okay, I'm missing this story because I'm missing the names, but somebody just got like the franchise record, and it was against their wife previously held the record. I
Oh,
want,
that's
but
funny.
which is like, that's how, like, I mean, come on, that's like the WNBA has some great stories. I'm happy to be able to start shifting focus. I'll shout out the WNBA, that's YAY exclamation point podcast over at the Unpopular Opinion Network. So it's just like, and they've changed the name. It's You Don't Even Like This Podcast Network. So good stuff. So yeah, I am slowly getting ramped up on WNBA combination. Hey, winning in your fantasy squad helps. Hey, actually having numbers to start look over day to day really does help. Hey, having these narrative helps. And like I said, the fun scenario of being like the Lynx look like the best thing since sliced bread, and I kind of want to root for them to get their revenge against the Liberty this year. But also the best player on the Liberty is on my squad. So, maybe I don't want that. Maybe
I'm also a Liberty fan because Sabrina Ionescu, or Ionescu, sorry,
Yep,
um,
yep.
from Alameda County, from the East Bay, Oakland area. So yeah, we're all big fan of hers here. Although I have to say, I don't know if you've looked at this top line yet. I'll bring it up right now. Of course, you're the only one with individual WNBA stats, but Basketball Reference does have the high level stuff. And Minnesota Lynx, 10.7 margin of victory, 6.8 SRS at a 9-0 record. That's pretty good. In the NBA, they would be a 50 something win team, definitely in contention for the title, but they are only the second team in margin of victory in the WNBA right now because, of course, the Liberty are also 9-0, but their margin of victory is 19 with a 16 SRS, more than twice as good as the Lynx. So
I'm really curious too, because for what it's worth, it does say their SR their expected win total according to Basketball Reference
Yeah.
is 8-1, and I'm wondering, this has got to be painful, if that game against the Indiana Fever with where Caitlin Clark was healthy was the breaker.
Mm.
And for what it's worth, Caitlin Clark was actually Caitlin Clark was bad that game. By the way, that is the fun. If we were doing Wages of Win stories like we used to do more regularly, and I hope to get back to, so maybe that'll happen. Some people have been subscribing to Substack. I appreciate that, so maybe I'll get back there. But Aaliyah Boston on the
Oh
Fever
yeah.
is the real MVP. Aaliyah Boston is freaking ridiculous. So in that game where the Liberty won, but the Fever were so close. Aaliyah Boston, 27 points, 13 rebounds, 12 for 19 shooting. While Caitlin Clark did get 18 points and 10 assists, she also took 18 shots. And the NBA and WNBA are the same. You got to have more points than shots. And she put up 10 turnovers. So she had the whatever you call that bad triple, like the Russell Westbrook
The
triple double,
Russell
right?
Westbrook.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I will say Sabrina Ionescu I had on my squad last year
Hmm.
and did not have as good of a year. It was kind of a bummer, but I did win the console. I did win the consolation round and was not a great player. You know, when you're watching the numbers and are more up to date and winning, it's much more fun. And one thing I've been doing a good job of is being healthy. That's a cheat code, but as we saw in the playoffs, that matters. And I've also been monitoring like the waiver wire and picking players up that, look like they're getting good. So I've picked up a couple good players. Um, and the one that there are a couple, and by the way, the one I'm excited about that I didn't get to draft but just turned it around. Veronica Burton, Brian, may be my
Ooh.
new favorite player because Veronica Burton is the star of the Golden State Valkyries. The Golden State Valkyries stole the best color scheme in the NBA from the Kings. The Golden
Yeah.
State Valkyrie, of course, are on Golden State. The Golden State Valkyrie, fantastic name for a team. They fit your criteria, Brian.
Do you
Let me
know the
ask you a question.
nickname for the arena, which is the Warriors arena? Also, when the Valkyries are playing there, they call it Ballhalla, as in Vikings Valhalla, but for ball.
You have a pun based
Yeah,
Brian, there is nothing for me not to make the Valkyries
it's
my team
incredible.
of choice. Just absolutely great. And then Veronica Burton was this player that was okay, limited minutes, but comes to the Valkyries, is given minutes, and is their best player.
And she's young. I
And
think she's only 24. So this, like you said, yeah, this is her chance to finally play.
well, that's what makes the WNBA so much rougher than the NBA is just the consolidation of talent. Because
Yes.
if you look at March Madness, which is something I am hoping to get numbers for this year as well, that would be fun. I really want to get in the college game, and I know Dave is in the same boat. If you look at March Madness, right, they're the same size. But in the NBA, you got 30 teams to soak up all this talent coming from the W from March Madness. And in the WNBA, you have what, 12, right? Am I getting the number right?
I think that's right.
One, two, three.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, I think that's
13
right.
because of the expansion,
13.
because the
Oh,
Valkyries,
they're
right?
the
The Valkyries.
13th. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just to your
Uh,
point earlier about yeah, the team size and the way the draft went, the Valkyries had the 17th pick in the draft, which is the second round, right? It's not that would be mid first round in the NBA, but it's second round in the WNBA. And the player they took, they cut after like 1 or 2 days of training camp. They didn't even play her in a preseason game. Like, imagine if that happened in the NBA. A 17th overall pick just gets cut without going on the floor. It's just, yeah, it's a much smaller and newer league, even if it is way ahead of the NBA where it was at the same time.
Well, and it is funny to go back in time and remember stuff like that, where in the NBA in old school days, you would take a flyer on players that might never play. That was the case actually with Larry Bird. Larry Bird's story was the rules used to let you go back to college. So Larry Bird
Yeah.
dropped to sixth in the draft in part because like the Warriors were a joke at the time. Sorry. And so
Yep.
the Warriors he basically said, if you draft me, I'm not going to play for you. I'm going back to college and I'll enter the draft again. And then, of course, the Celtics did like the best thing, which was, to play to his ego correctly, to say, we're going to draft you and we're going to have faith in you. So go back to college and come back. And he did. And then,
And
Brian,
then trade for Robert Parrish from the Warriors.
I was going to say, okay, you beat me to it. I was going to
Sorry.
rub salt in the wound.
Sorry.
Is Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale were
Yeah.
traded in the same trade to the Celtics for Joe Barely Cares. Sorry, Joe. That's such a mean nickname to have caught on, and it's not true, but it's a funny nickname. But it is funny how the Warriors ostensibly made the dynasty of the Celtics 80s in a fun way. And
Yeah,
but and
yeah.
those were the eras there, right? Where we have players that, hey, the Milwaukee Bucks or whatever draft, or I think it was the Hawks. The Hawks drafted, I want to say Dr. J, thinking, hey, we can't get his rights, but you never know. And as you're pointing here, the 17th pick, just interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. There are probably better players, I'm not sure, but still, it's like, yeah, you don't keep them. But
Yeah, I think
we're
that
start
player went to Atlanta afterwards, but I don't know.
currently is not late, according to Basketball Reference.
What's her name? I forgot already.
Cheyenne Sellers has
Thank
not
you. Yeah,
laced up for a game yet.
that was it.
Um, And but to your point though, is a bummer. And that's what makes the WNBA so hard. Is like you can be a good player and you're on the bench of a good team. So I am we're seeing this right here. The Valkyries are great because we're getting players a chance to shine. And there are other dude, Milwaukee, come on, like or Oshkosh, where the Herd play that are currently having financial difficulties for the G League team for the Bucks. Like we could have a
Mm.
WNBA squad there. That'd be nice. I'd go to some of those games. So, like I said, hopefully more WNBA content outside of me just talking about my fantasy squad and players I love. I'm going to see if I can find a way to trade for Veronica Burton, although I think that'll be a hard sell at this
No,
point in my opinion.
it's been lightning in a bottle. So I've not been a WNBA fan at all really in past years. I would come in and watch, the late rounds of the playoffs to talk to you guys about it, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't into it. But now that we have a local team, I'm watching every game, even non-Valkyries games. I watched all their preseason games. They're selling out the Chase an NBA stadium. They're getting 10,000 plus at the stadium. To the point about, cutting the 17th overall draft pick. Um they've had to erect an entire franchise, in the past few months. Hire an entire front office, hire an entire coaching staff, figure out where their offices are going to be, get to know each other, actually build a team and go throughout this process of the offseason while they're starting a new franchise. And they have a 4-5 record. They're not just they're actually a real team. Um,
That's so cool.
yeah. So Veronica Burton is awesome. And yeah, she's only a third year player. So it's just incredible to have a young star, entering her prime. But they got veterans as well. I'm looking at the roster right now. Monique Billings, Tiffany Hayes, Kayla Thornton, especially, right? She played for the Liberty on their championship team, I believe. Those are three players that are very experienced in the WNBA. So they brought in the veterans, but they brought in young players as well. They have a lot of international players from, France, Belgium, and other countries. Yeah, Temi Fagbenle, I forget
Oh
where
my
she's
God.
from
So that
exactly.
was
She's great though. She used to play with Caitlin Clark.
so in terms of wins produced on the Valkyries, just to give credit where credit's due, to be
Yeah.
kind of mean, what we basically have is in terms of great Veronica Burton at the moment has 1.5 wins produced, which is good for like top 10 of the WNBA. So, argue it's weird to be like MVP caliber and it's a smaller league, but I'll still give it to her. 231 wins per 40. And this is something I love that Dave Barry has done for like long term, right? Is if you when you're talking about other stats, when we're talking about trying to do per or win shares in the WNBA, it doesn't work by how they are constructed, but the way Dave Barry constructed wins produced, it is normalized by position, it is normalized by year. And then we also, right, all you have to do is change that per from 48 for the NBA to 40 for the WNBA to 36 if we have a league that only does 36. So Veronica Burton is 231 wins per 48. So star-ish level player. Of course, there are the players at the 300 level. It's small enough. Um, but Temi is like 150. So just a solid player where it's more the minutes, but still that. And then Monique Billings is awesome. And then Cecilia is also really good. Those are the players per minute, really good. And then Kayla Thornton is a like the third quote unquote best wins producer on the team, but is, sorry, Brian, below average.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, they are. So their record is 4-5, but they are 3-6. Pythagorean. They have had some big blowouts. The Liberty beat them by like 30 points or something. But
Liberty are
yeah,
really, really, really. I mean, that's the thing. I have Brianna Stewart, MVP caliber player, not MVP of the league right now. That is, I'll get the name because she plays for the Hawks.
yeah.
Alicia Gray is the MVP right now for the Dream.
Hmm.
Number two is Nafisa, like we mentioned. Three is Brianna Stewart,
That's
and
not surprising.
at a lowly, Brian. Just what are we even doing here? She's done. I'm being sarcastic. Of course, Sabrina Ionescu is only sixth in the WNBA.
Oh,
So
so you have two top 10 players. That's pretty good for the
yeah,
Liberty.
The Liberty have Stewart and Ionescu in the top 10, whereas the Lynx have Nafisa Collier. I hope I'm getting that right. Only one. That's actually kind of surprised. I thought they had more, but it's actually down. So Kayla McBride and Jessica Shepard and Alana Smith, they have three in the top, they have four in the top 20. And the really fun one, Brian, though, is the Sparks actually have, hope I
Mm.
get this right, Darica Hamby and Azura Stevens. They have two in the top 10. But
Yeah,
then I
Hamby's
think
good.
yeah, so
Hamby's good.
there's so some really good. Yeah, this is that's good too, right? The Sparks having a goodish team would have been probably good for them to get Paige. Although what I will throw out to be mean is Paige buckets, Paige Buckers, or how do you say is it Bukers
Beckers.
or Beckers?
Beckers, yeah.
Okay, I've so it's very similar to he passed away, but I want to say like Bob Eaker, like the
Bob
just to get out
Euchre. Yeah, yeah.
Euchre. So that okay. So here's what I'm saying. I just did it again, right? How people pronounce that UECK is ridiculous. It is not consistent across the United States, but fine. Paige Beckers is it's very Caitlin Clarkey. She has actually turned it around. Her numbers. I do actually remember this. So first off, I think she's had some injury because she's only played 6 games.
She has a
But
concussion.
okay, yep,
Yeah.
lines up. Had same story as kind of like Caitlin Clark, where it's the like welcome to the league, takes you a little bit of time to adjust. So I think it would have been good for Paige to, I'm kind of mad, right? Same scenario as the Dallas Mavericks. Probably would have preferred Paige for LA for the league. But still isn't like the star yet. But just give her a little time, and by a little time, I guess I meant only a couple games because I remember when I was looking at her the first couple games of the season, I was like, oh yeah, not there yet, and her numbers are already above, as mentioned, to be mean like the second best player on the Valkyries.
Yeah. No, I mean she's great, but yeah, I mean don't mess around with those head injuries. I think she's still sitting out, but we'll probably be back in a few games.
Yeah, I mean that's how how not to be excited, right? Just so many good teams,
It's
so many
great.
good things to see.
Just I mean, we're just two dudes talking about women's basketball. I just have to say seeing all the young girls and even, older and elderly women there in the stadium, just like women watching women's basketball, it makes me feel good.
It's both. And I mean, that's the thing is you're looking at us, it's like all you had to do was put a team near you and
Yep.
make it and give me enough of my friends that are playing on a fantasy squad, right? That was all it took. And Dave Barry has been championing this for years about like the WNBA, the audience is there. You literally just have to give them the product. So we're finally starting to get the product. We're getting more games available thanks to Caitlin Clark in part, right? It's a weird chicken and the egg scenario, right? Where Caitlin Clark is very akin to Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan
Right.
in the early days of the NBA. It's
Yeah.
basically like the league got big enough to produce a star that people want to watch. So the people that came before, of course, were there for the person now. And so when people are saying it's all Caitlin Clark and there's something, it's like no, it's like you are reaching this tipping point of having the product everybody wants to see, and that is fantastic, Brian, and I can't wait to see where we go. And I'm glad I took us a little bit long. I don't think I quite took us to the half of the game, but by the way, Brian, I took us long enough. Indiana is up 39-36. So if they
There
win
you
this
go.
game, I'm going to have to go to Indiana for game 6 or see, let's be more reasonable, see if it is feasible for me and my son to afford that, which I hate to say that
In
that
this
that number
economy?
is that number is higher than I would like, to be honest. So that may or may not happen. So I don't know if I'm rooting for Indiana in game 2. If you listen to this in the future, hopefully I'll get this turned around really quick. So hopefully, Brian, I get this out for those in the future. I ideally hope I get this out June 12th of 2025. If it's later, you are allowed to yell at me. Brian, Thanks for letting me talk your F about my fantasy squad, a well-known thing that nobody wants to hear, but I tricked you. I got you on a podcast. It's like you have no
Yeah.
choice.
No, I mean, I don't play fantasy anymore at all. And I used to play, I think all three of the main North American sports. I knew numbers so much better back then when you're looking at them every day for fantasy. It's easy to get off the path when you're not playing fantasy, I think.
And that's why I'm glad it's back and people are here. All right. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be a little more regular. As Brian noted, the offseason is coming. We have plenty of coach firings. We have plenty of big names. I mean, right, every ESPN. I'll ask you this to lead into the offseason and just yes or no, and then we'll go out, Brian. But do you think Giannis gets moved this offseason?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Because he just said today or yesterday that he wanted to stay. The dreaded vote of confidence.
The Damian Lillard, I'm not going anywhere.
I
And then
think it's like
suddenly,
51% though. I think it's close.
okay. Well, I'll be excited. I mean, can we do this again, Brian? Let's do this for fun because we did it with Jimmy Butler. Can we do this, Brian?
Mm,
Come on. Giannis, Warriors. They're right there. Do it.
sure. Well,
The Valkyries season tickets you can get. I'm sure you can get a discount on them now if you get the ground floor. Like, come on, Giannis. Never been a better time.
actually, the Warriors players are frequent attendees courtside at the Valkyries games. So that's great. Um, this offseason is interesting because I think almost, well, step back. I know we're trying to end the show, but just briefly, bigger picture. Um, because of the play-ins tournament, way more teams make the playoffs. There's way less tanking teams than usual. And I know we talk about tanking incentives get misunderstood, but the point is, I feel like there's a lot more teams trying to win and not trying to dump players. And we're at the point now where my understanding is I think it's only the Brooklyn Nets that have substantial salary cap room in the offseason, that this new CBA, the apron and the second apron of the luxury tax are so punitive that there's not really going to be much of a free agency at all this summer. So what analysts are saying is this is the summer of trades. And
Interesting.
Giannis and Kevin Durant are at the top of that list. And Kevin Durant might be the one to move first because he probably definitely needs to go. And with Giannis, it's not as clear.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's my
the
off-season preview.
yeah, everybody, yeah, that'll be fun and we will check it out. So that and by the way, you've given me homework for next show now to start investigating a salary cap. And then we'll see if next show I get to tell you about going to Indiana or not. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Box Score Geek Show, found most places podcasts are found. The Box Score Geek Show. You can find numbers for NBA currently, boxscoregeeks.com. There was actually this week a Heroku outage, so I actually just had to kick the site to get those back up. But the regular season numbers are back up there. WNBA numbers coming somewhere in the near future. And I now that I've told Dave like in private, Dave Barry. Now that I'm saying it aloud on a podcast, I know he won't let me hear the end of it. So that'll have to happen in the near future. Brian Foster, I can't remember, Brian. I know you're like I don't recall if you've filled out on Blue Sky enough to be
Oh,
findable.
I don't think I am. I went and looked at that and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I'm too
So
much of a
so
boomer.
if you are if you are on Blue Sky, you do need to set your profile and name for you to be findable, if that makes any sense. So it's bfoster.bluesky.social if you want to follow there and incentivize Brian to do more. And the last thing you did was 6 months ago talk about how me and you were recording a show. So that is definitely fun. Who knows? I don't really feel with all the stuff that's been going on, we've avoided politics and I'll keep it that way, Brian. Don't want to talk about other sites. So B Foster on Blue Sky, the box score geeks found most places, nerd numbers for me. Anything else, Brian?
No, I will do a politics shout out though. Shout out to California, best state in the nation. We're
Yes.
proud and we're not going away, Dre.
And just if you're it would be weird if you're listening to this show with how Brian and my politics are, obviously, but when you see the man, I almost cursed. When you see the news and they're like, this place is a hellscape, it's like, be aware, no. We got big cities, and like every time they're like, Minneapolis is on fire in this, or Los Angeles is, it's like, yeah, stuff can be going wrong, but I think the to leave this briefly in Sportsland to end on this note, like literal Super Bowl victory, fans after a Super Bowl have done more damage in some cases. So it's like, I don't know. And it's everything. So thank you to everybody in LA for doing what they're doing, and to any fear mongering about what's going on the wrong side. Incorrect is what I'll say there. All right. We dated the show for sure, Brian. We'll see you next time.